This month's expert session is about system architect success patterns with Agile Hive Cloud. Now, you won't hear a lot of Agile and safe support tools talk about the system architect because it's a very complex topic. I am thrilled to talk about it because the bulk of my career actually has been in model-based systems engineering. And so I love to talk about this. I'm excited to share that there is nothing that I will say, yeah, but we don't have that yet in Agile Hive, because what system architects need in a safe transformation, a safe environment, is they need transparency and collaboration. I worked with an insurance company in the US last year and had an architects workshop, and the architect said, well, somebody came in and taught us Agile and said, oh, you don't need any architects anymore. It was like, what? Scaled Agile means the systems are complex enough that absolutely you need architects. And so the great news is that just getting their work visible and included with the teams and connected together is not only supported by Agile Hive, it is one of the most impactful ways that we can be successful with scaled Agile in a large, complex environment. And if you've seen my previous sessions on roles, you know that I like to start with the responsibility wheels that came in SAFe 6.0. I love these visualizations. And so as before, we're going to go through these items one at a time. So also what's notable here, I talked about transparency and collaboration, collective ownership. This is one of the most complex collaboration diagrams of all the three major roles at the art level between the RTEs and product management, the system architects. Now, product management, yes, has a lot of stakeholders that they have to integrate with. The system architects have a complex ecosystem, if you will, of people that they must interact with. And so let's talk about those interactions. I'm going to start with a slide from the 3-day Safe for Architects training, because I just want to emphasize the complexity of what architects have to deal with. Now, we are talking about a system architect who's working at a single system level with an Agile release train. If we have solutions, we have to have common architecture considerations across systems, and an enterprise architect is very common in all of the enterprises that we work with where they have more than a single system. I won't read all of these to you, but you can get the recording and look at all the details that are here. And so the tension, really, I see tension everywhere in the system architect role. The tension is between the system architect and the teams that are implementing features. Man, they're Agile, right? So they're cranking out features, cranking out features, cranking out features. But then you've got these aggregation of the Agile release train systems into solutions, and we've got to keep the architecture clean. We have to keep it maintainable. We have to adhere to all the non-functional requirements, little things like security, compliance, maintainability, usability even. So it gets very complex. This is why most Agile tools don't really dive into what is needed for the system architects, but we will do it. Now, as if you didn't have enough complexity already, in large enterprises, many enterprises of all sizes, they will also have architect roles in different domains. Business analytics, AI, huge, where you have an architect specialist. information architecture, application architecture, business architecture, security architecture, you name it. There are specialists in how are we going to implement these technologies at the, I'll call it the big decision level. The big decision level is what distinguishes architecture from design. Now, Scrum, Agilists, they're like, we don't need no stinking architecture. We have emergent design. Every iteration, we're going to figure out what design decisions we need to make. And that's okay and appropriate if you're building one small system that can be built and maintained by one Agile team, or maybe, 2 to 3 Agile teams. So it's complex. What do we need to support that? Well, first of all, they need to be able to align architecture with business priorities. Is reuse a priority? Is AI a priority? Is compliance? Probably, if you're in automotive or aerospace or you name it, regulated environment. So we have to be able to understand what the business priorities are. Is it cranking out features to win new business? Is it being competitive? Is it being compliant? We have to understand the business priorities so that the system can be architected to meet that appropriately. Participate in solution definition, define non-functional requirements. I could give you a very long list. I worked with a medical device manufacturer, one of the world's most creative medical device manufacturers, a couple of years ago, and they called these the illities. And it was like a competition, right? Is sustainability or reusability or this illity going to win out in our system? And it was almost like a competitive thing amongst the architects for these different elements. And so capturing those decisions about which of these illities is going to be our highest priority is something that if you don't have it explicitly captured and available, there will be ongoing tension, I'll call it, throughout the life of that system. And then lastly, they kind of have to fight for the capacity allocation for the enablement work. And this is where the insurance company I worked with, we had the architects in the room and we had some of the leadership team in the room. And the architects were, they won't ever fund our re-architecting with this framework, even though we know it's going to make it blah, 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 blah. And the leadership team said, can you put that in words that we understand? And reaching that understanding of this highly technical world of, yes, we're going to use Atlassian Forge and it provides security in this way. And we have to do this or we won't be able to host on Atlassian, or we have to be able to do this, or we have this kind of security risk. The architects have to be able to translate the technical details into business language so that they get support for performing the architecture work and finding the balance. It's really tough work. It is even tougher if they just have all those discussions in meeting minutes on Confluence pages and nobody can ever go back and find it. Okay, so here's an example of my system where I have a strategic theme, envision at least 2 new product lines to expand the portfolio by 2025. And so we have it linked to some work, an enabler by the system engineering team. We're going to create reference models for product lines. One of the most effective things that I do as an Agile coach is I help the architects create diagrams or representations or words that are understandable by the various stakeholders that that need to participate with architecture and or advocate for architecture, etc. So we have enablers. Yeah, we have ability to link the enablers to things like strategic themes, right? What we have is the ability to support this. What people mostly don't do yet is really capture it in the right way, in the right language to make it effective. Here's another example. One thing that, my system, which I call Flyby Hive, there's an enabler. When I worked at Airbus and Boeing, they both said, we've got to get manufacturing and servicing of our products into our value stream, right? And that requires architecture. And so that's how I came up with this enabler, studying installation and servicing of the navigation system for my system. Those people doing that work aren't going to go, I wonder if this is going to fit with the architecture. Let me go talk to Daniel and see if, he's on board. No, they're heads down getting the work done. It is up to the architects to survey the backlog and say, this is where we need to ensure adherence to our architecture, and or we need to harvest the rules, the guidance, the guardrails from the work to get into the architecture so that the big decisions are there to keep the system going. Okay, so there's an example where the systems engineering team just capture the installation and serviceability constraints in the system architecture. If you don't keep your architecture guidance up to date, what happens? Yeah, it's going to fall apart. Okay, sorry about my slide here. We want to connect the work to the architecture constraints. And here's, the dependency view, of course, in Agile Hive, and managing dependencies is one of the hallmarks of SAFe. So I had to throw in this view here where now what we showed you last month, we can hide the unparented issues, and we make it really easy to see the dependency between those work items that I just showed you as an issue type. Okay. The other thing, we need to keep architects accountable to the teams. I know I worked all my career with architects, usually some of the most intelligent people on the team, right? We run the risk. They live in their ivory tower. After their brains come up with some beautiful design, they bless the world with it, right? They're often not held accountable to getting their things done on the same cadence as everyone else. So this is part of what Agile Hive will help us do: plan in iterations and plan in PIs and connect the work together, help other people understand what the architects are doing and why. Okay, here's our next one: defining and communicating the architecture vision, right? If we want people to adhere to the architecture vision, we got to make it easy for them to find it and understand it, and ask us questions. If they don't have a tool like Agile Hive, again, all the details fall through the cracks. So I created here an example. One thing that I like to do, when I created my example with architecture teams, there's some repeating work that these teams do every iteration. Maybe it's a product specification review. Maybe it is updating the architecture. Maybe it is ongoing training on the architecture. So just because this is work they would do every PI, do we not put it in our Agile tool? Sure. That would be stupid, right? We want to make sure all the work is visible and connected. So here's just a simple example. The description: in order to help maintain architecture integrity over the life of the navigation system, the system architects will assist with and update the architecture vision as needed. Okay. And here's just a simple architecture vision example. I think I pulled that from a TOGAF site. There are a lot of architectural frameworks that people use. And so this was just an example, and Joshua Brock here actually helped me put it into a Confluence page that we linked to an issue. So it's right there, right? There's no excuse for not being able to find the architecture vision, knowing what it says so that you can follow it. Okay, our next responsibility is evolving the system design with the teams. Now, this is where Agile and system architecture really come together, because you got those Agile teams who say every iteration we got emergent design, every sprint we're going to figure out, what do we need to build in architecture. No big upfront architecture, that's foolish, right? So what we have to have is this collaboration between the architects who are building maybe some architectural framework and the teams who are using those architectural elements, right? And so we have to have this right balance between, we got construction going on here. I hope it's not bothering your audio. So we got to have this right balance between what's called intentional architecture and emergent design. And I have one of my favorite graphics that I use in my Safer Architects classes is one that was created by an amazing architect named Jen Walters on one program that I worked on. The safe graphic for an architectural runway is this little thing at the bottom that's looks like hills and valleys, and I'm like, I don't ever want to land on that runway, that architectural runway. That looks dangerous. So Jen created this really nice visualization, and it was for a system where they were migrating all of the enterprise apps from a huge aerospace defense contractor. They were moving all their enterprise apps into the cloud from data centers. And so this was her graphic. Here's, we're going to land these apps from this location, this data center, and then later we're going to land these, we're going to land these, we're going to land these. And so what we do is we created these enabler features to create a smooth landing, if you will, right? And at the same time, these Scrum or Agile teams will be trying to use that, and they themselves will define innovation improvements that they need in order to do this migration. So that's the general graphic, and here's how she presented it. She's like, okay, people, we got to do these things, right? These are our enablers, like home drives, etc. You can read the database strategy. Here was the punchline. If we do not do these enablers, we are going to have a very rough landing, right? And so that's the whole thing. That's the collaboration. That's the motivation for building this architectural runway and balancing intentional architecture with emergent design. Thank you, Jen Walters. Okay, two more real quick. We talked a bit about non-functional requirements, and so there's a great description of non-functional requirements for those of you who've maybe not been in an architecture role or done a lot of requirements development. This will be a great introduction to you, so that will help you talk to architects, ask the right questions, collaborate with architects. And we want to promote a system design that supports built-in quality. Are these components testable? If I'm building a component for a physical airplane and have to test on a physical environment, the APIs and interfaces that I create for the components may be quite different depending on what I need, right? And so we want to support built-in quality, the economics of being able to test every iteration, integrate and test every iteration. The economics of that are usually very straightforward to figure out. And so we want to support that. Oh, who was it? A friend of mine who's an SPCT at a big insurance company said, you know what? The leadership said, okay, we're going to do for 3 PIs, we're going to build features. And yeah, we'll test them and we'll collect all the defects. And then for the 4th PI of the year, we'll fix all the defects. Oh my gosh, right? I mean, if we test every iteration, what we learn from the defects we find and fixing those defects helps us improve the quality as we go along. This was my response to the guy. Your leadership people have never developed a line of code, have they? So anyway, quality practices have to be explicit. Here's an example of automation of behavior-driven development testing. If you don't explicitly get it in there, educate people on what it is, what's the benefit, how much work will it take to do that, then as any of you who have developed systems know, that kind of thing always gets shoved aside in favor of build more features, build more features, build more features. So we have to be explicit. It's an enabler. And then lastly, we have to be able to prioritize with weighted shortest job first against the other features, these things in green, right? The enablers. And normally it's the risk reduction opportunity enablement component of weighted shortest job first, where these enablers can get moved up into the priority list. And so using weighted shortest job first is a great way to have the conversation about the value of those. Lastly, and I'll just brush aside this one really quickly, it's supporting DevOps and the continuous delivery pipeline. Everybody's continuous delivery pipeline is different in different stages, but it's just like built-in quality. We have to support design, the design of that, architect for it. Like if we're going to use feature flags to turn off and on and off features so that we can release them on demand, you know, that's what this is all about for the architects. Okay, conclusion. Does this look like the same conclusion from my last 2 sessions? Yes. I put system architect. So we need a single source of truth for the architects, the ones directly called out as part of SAFE, as well as any supporting and related information, just like that architecture vision, because transparency and alignment are essential for managing system complexity. We are not yet the Borg, all connected, right, through our brains. So we have to have a way to have the information supporting the system all in one place. And for that, I want to turn it over to Daniel, who's going to talk about how they're advancing Agile Hive Cloud to help us with that. So that concludes my session on system architecture support in Agile Hive Cloud.